Hello and good morning Internet. This is Michael from Trike Bike, and today we're going to go through the assembly of our new 2027 model Fat Tricycle by Sobowo. This has been one of our biggest selling tricycles for the last 4 years. So follow me through today and we'll complete the assembly. Start by removing everything from the boxes. Let's open this rear box first. This has got the entire rear axle assembly of the tricycle. So in here we have some mudguard brackets. Of course we've got our manual. This will give you information about the assembly and also the operation of the Fat Tricycle. Our chain and mounting hardware. Front basket. We have some foam packaging. And then in the bottom we have the entire rear axle assembly. Okay, I'm just going to lift this out. It can be fairly tight in this box to get it out. Okay, we've got it out. I'm just going to put it down on the ground. The only remaining thing we have in this box is our rear mudguards and our front mudguard. I'm going to start by lifting our whole rear assembly up onto our bench. I'm just going to position it so it won't fall off. Stay. We can now go and open the other box. These staples which are used to hold the box shut are very, very sharp, so make sure you stay well away from them. Okay, opening our rear box, we've got our toolkit box which has our assembly tools, some associated hardware that we need, and also our battery charger. Inside here we can also see we've got our front wheel. It's attached to the frame with cable ties, so we need to dig around here, look inside and release the cable ties. I think that's everything. We can pull it out, remove the packaging, protective disc on the axle. I'll put the front wheel to one side. So we're going to lift the rear of the frame out of the box, and this will give us access to the rear of the frame, which is what we need to expose. And the first job we're going to do is to join the main part of the frame to the rear axle assembly. So what I like to do is just start by removing anything on the end of the frame and the plastic coming to it. It just gives you really easy access to everything. When you're doing this, a lot of people, or sometimes, not a lot, but some people will ring up and say, oh, my frame's got scratches. It's because they're removing this plastic with a knife. They don't have the control to stop it from scratching. That's why I like to use some little side cutters. That way I can cut through the tape and the plastic without scratching the frame. Now I'm just going to remove the plastic around the top of the battery. Now lifting the frame on its own is okay, but if you remove the battery it'll make it even easier. And we normally find the battery keys are attached to the handlebars. So you've got to have a little bit of a dig through. I've just found them. You've got to have a little bit of a dig through the packaging and you'll eventually find the keys. What we can do now is insert that in, unlock the battery, remove the battery from its frame. I'll go over and put it on charge for now, and it will be nicely charged by the time we finish our battery assembly. Okay, let's just open this box. So in here we have our pedals, our front light, we have some hardware for assembly, mainly fitting the mudguards, some cable ties. We've got a charging cord, we'll just leave that in the box for now. We've got our toolkit, so you get a really great high quality toolkit with Sobowo tricycles. In here we've also got our user manual, and in the bottom of this box we have our charger. So with this tricycle you end up with two manuals. One is a user manual, the other is an assembly and rider's guide. So make sure you read those before you head out on the road. I'll move those to one side. In another bag here, which I'll just open, we've got a couple of chains with plastic on the outside. These are used for the rear basket. In here I've got our chain, so I can just unwind that, and you'll see our chain with the links. You want to make sure you don't lose either of them. We'll go a little bit further. This is what I'm looking for. This is our packet of nuts and bolts, and these are used for attaching the main frame to the rear of the tricycle. We'll go a bit further. These are some bolts for mounting the brake calipers. And finally, we'll open this up. These are our brackets which attach to the frame and hold the mudguards. There's 4 of them, 2 for each side. We'll put them aside for now. We'll get rid of some of this trash. For now, first job, I need 6 of these large bolts, washers and nuts for attaching the front of the frame to the rear of the tricycle. And as you'll see, these are quite large bolts. The way it works is we have a washer goes on, then that goes through the frame, and on the other side we have one more washer and then a nylock nut. So the frame gets secured in this area here. I like to get myself ready before I start, and I'll go through and fit a washer to each of these bolts. Okay, I'm now ready to attach the 2 parts together. Just get rid of some of this trash and we'll move on. Okay, I'm going to bring the frame out of the box. And again, this gets quite heavy, so I recommend having someone help you do this. I'm just going to switch arms. Now you lift it up, and while you do it, you make sure you hold the forks. If you don't hold the forks, they can slide out. So it's important to get the forks around, and we get up to this back section here where we align everything. Just going to cut a couple more cable ties. That'll make it a lot easier for me when I'm moving everything around. It gives us a little bit more room. So what I'm going to do carefully is lift up the frame to attach it to the rear section, what we call the rear axle assembly. I strongly recommend that you do this with a second person. It makes it so much easier. But I'm going to try by myself, bring it in close together. I've got 1 bolt through. I can tip the rear axle assembly up, and you'll see what I mean by having a second person. It's giving me a bit of trouble here. Okay, I've got my second bolt through. I'm just going to lift it back up onto the stand because it's just rolled forward. This is what I mean about having 2 people. So we've got 3 bolts on each side. I need to get some more bolts in. This can be fairly difficult because it is hard to see, and you need to have everything lined up. Okay, 1 bolt, second bolt, and third bolt. So now all of this is secure. We can rock it backwards and forwards and it won't fall apart, but before we tempt fate, I'm going to go ahead and put the washer and the nut on each of these 6 bolts. Okay, that's the last nut. Oop, if I can get it on and started. Now I'm not going to tighten those yet. I'm going to leave them loose until after we've got the chain fitted, but I'm going to take this opportunity to remove the rest of the packaging. Okay, off camera I've just spent about 20 minutes removing the plastic off the forward part of the frame. I've still got some on the back, but I'll do that in a few minutes. We're now just going to clean up our workbench by moving a couple of things. So I'm just going to, for the moment, temporarily fit the seat. I'll just put that in to get it off the bench. What I want to do is to fit the handlebars. So I'm going to remove this cable tie up here, if I can get a good purchase on it. So you see we need to get this to sit down all the way, so it's just going to be a matter of jiggling the forks backwards and forwards. Now what I want to do is to fit the handlebars. So we need to get them positioned around where all of the cables are fairly straight and nothing is twisted, and we can just gently put it down on top of the stem. So for now I'm happy with that position. I'm going to go ahead and mount the front basket. Okay, I've unwrapped the front basket. I'm going to start by removing the basket mounting screws. So we've got 4 of them. They use an M5 Allen key. Now when we mount our basket, we need to make sure that these cables are out of the road. So I've got our front basket here. I'm just going to put the screws in loosely to start with, just to position everything nicely. Again, a few sets of hands will make this a lot easier if you're doing it at home. I've got that started. Okay, I've got 4 screws in loose. We've got a lot of basket movement there. I'm pretty good at lining this up now, but quite often we'll put a spirit level on there. But I've gotten pretty good at making it level. So we're just going to tighten up those 4 bolts. Now we've got our front basket mounted. We'll do our handlebars next. It's going to be a bit hard to show you everything that's happening here. But what we want to do first is with an M6 is release the top of the handlebars so we can rotate them down. Now in the top here is a bolt. It's an M5, so this is the wrong size, but it's an M5. We first need to start by tightening that. So an M5 Allen key, we're going to tighten it up. It'll take maybe 10 turns or so as it works its way down. I can feel it now just starting to get firm, and we'll do it up to about 8 Newton meters, which is fairly firm. What you want to do while you're tightening is just check that the sleeves around here, the collar of the head stem, is sitting down low. You can get the forks, move them backwards and forwards a few times to reposition, then tighten it up. We've also got 2 screws on the side here. Now these are M4. I'm just going to get the right sized Allen key, and I'm just going to do those up, just nip them up for now. That stops the handlebars moving sideways. I'm going to lift this back up to the upright position, get the right size, M6. I'm going to do this up. I'm just going to move it backwards and forwards. It'll find a nice spot where it'll bite in. And then once that's there, fairly firm, and we can move on to the next thing. Okay, it's now time to fit the front wheel, but before we do, we're going to fit the front mudguard. So we have a bolt that comes in the front. The mudguard comes in from behind. We have a washer and an M10 or M6 nut that goes on the back. I'm just going to leave that fairly loose for now. Once I get it started, we're going to go down now and add the bolts for the mudguard supports. Okay, these bolts are an M5 and they have a large washer. The washer goes on the outside, everything goes through, and then there's an M5 nut that goes on the back. And we do exactly the same on the other side. Once I have those in place, we can go ahead and tighten them. That's good. I'm now just going to tighten the top of the mudguard. We'll nip it up gently to start with, and then dropping everything today. The older you get, the further the ground is away. So just before it gets tightened up all the way, I'm just going to wiggle the mudguard up to lift it up off the bracket. That'll give our front tyre the most amount of clearance. We're now going to fit the front wheel, but before we do, we need to remove this plastic insert from the disc brakes. That's keeping the discs separated during transport. Remove that, I'll prepare the front wheel for it to go in. Okay, to prepare the front wheel, I'm going to take off the axle nuts and the first washer. I'm going to leave the washer that's closest the edge of the wheel, I'm going to leave that on the axle, and you'll notice that they have a tab on them. The tab, when we line it up, needs to point down. So at the moment we've got it pointing up. I'm going to rotate it around to point down. Just make some room here. Again, two-person job. Here I don't have that luxury, so I need to lift up the bike, get the front wheel in, I need to line up the disc and then drop it into the frame. After I pick up my tools here. Now if it doesn't drop straight in, it means that the axle is a little bit crooked. So using a 10mm spanner, I'm just going to rotate it a little bit. You'll see that it's now dropped in. It's an actual keyed fit. So it now drops in. I can now come back and put the washer and the nut, and you'll notice that this cable is hanging downwards, and that's exactly what you want. I'm going to tighten the axle nuts on both sides, making sure they're nice and firm. And now we need to plug our wheel into the main harness. So if you look here, you'll see an arrow on one side, an arrow on the other, and these arrows need to be matching. At the moment I don't have enough cable here, so I'm just going to pull a little bit of cable through the bike frame, down lower, lower, that's it. So I can now line up those arrows and push everything together nice and firm. That's it. We can now undo that bracket to mount the cable to the front fork. I've got the cable in there. We'll just do up that bracket again. That finishes the installation of the front wheel. So while we've got all three wheels on, I can go around and check the tyre pressure. On our fat tricycle, we like to have the tyre pressure at 16 psi. .1 is close enough. Now what I'm going to do is to fit the chain. So remove the chain from the plastic bag. Inside there'll be two little links we need to make sure we don't lose. And I like to lay the chain back down on the plastic bag. That keeps it off the workbench or your assembly area and keeps it nice and clean. We'll just quickly unravel this chain. Now, It goes around the rear sprocket at the back of the bike. So we just place it around there and I'll bring it forward. Now I'm going to put the joiner link in one side. Our chain's just popped off the back, that's okay. I'm just going to position it back on. I'm going to bring the bottom of the chain around this sprocket. A bit of foam in there, I'll just get that out. That's a bit of foam packaging. And you'll see they touch together, which is good. If they don't touch together, it means you need to move the frame closer together. So I've got our open link here. I'll just pull the chain apart so you can see. Put that back together. We've got our face plate. So I'm going to push it on, hold it on one side with my thumb, and I'll just gently flex the chain. And what that'll do, it'll close the link a little bit. And it's now gone on. I'm just going to wiggle it backwards and forwards till I hear a click. And that's now in place and won't come undone. Again, 2 people is good for this, but our chain at the moment is way too loose. So what I like to do is I've got a little bit of a pool noodle which I can just squeeze down in here to hold the rear frame nice and firm. We need to go around behind and basically pull the rear frame away from the front frame, and that'll give the chain more tension. So what I'll do, I'll get it into a nice position and I'll come along and tighten up these nuts. But what we've got is 3 bolts on each side, and I just want to get one done up at the moment on each side, so just bear with me. Just going to check the chain tension. That's a little bit loose at the moment, so I'll just nip this up and okay, we're getting there. I'm just going to pull the 2 parts again, get them apart. That's created a bit more chain tension. I'll nip that up. That's much better. I'm going to do another bolt on the other side. That way it'll stop the frame twisting, so the back and the front will be at perfect right angles. Okay, I can now go ahead and do all the other bolts. Okay, I'm now going to fit the pedals. So the pedals are very easy to fit. If you look on the end of the axle stub here, you'll see WRWL. So the L means left, the R means right. So it attaches on the right hand side and you rotate the pedal to the right. When you go to the left hand side, it's got an opposite thread, so you rotate the pedal to the left. Put that on nice and firm. Just have a quick trash clean up and I'll jump on the other side and fit the left pedal. So again, align the pedal with the shaft, wind it to the left this time. That's got it. Using a 15mm spanner, we can apply that firmly. Okay, it's time to fit the rear brakes. So in the calipers we have the same as the front, we have a plastic insert which I'm just going to slide out. Once you've done that, do not touch the brake handle. I've also got the 4 bolts that we use. Quite often you'll find that one of these cables is slightly longer than the other. And in this case it's the bottom one here. So I'm going to fit that onto the right hand side because it has a further distance to travel. Okay, this is going to be a little bit hard to see because we're got to weave our way through the frame. But what I'm going to do is to fit the caliper. So it slides over the rear disc. Oh, I'm going to drop the bolts in the hand there because it's causing me some trouble. Okay, we just position the caliper over the disc. We move it around so we can get our bolts lined up. I'll just start them by finger to start with. I've to do this slightly differently than I normally do because we're filming. I can't get around the back without blocking the camera. But I'm just going to get all of this started. Once we have that in, I'm going to go to using the Allen key. We're going to get that in nice and firm. Don't over tighten it, just nip it up. Same on the back screw. Okay, you'll notice now the calipers, everything's mounted firmly, but the calipers are still loose, and that's because there's a bolt here and also another bolt there. Now what we need to do is to put the brakes on before we tighten these up. So let me just show you how we do that. Okay, what we want to do is to pump the brakes a few times just to get them nice and firm, and I'm just going to use a clamp. I put a clamp around to hold it in position. If you don't have a clamp, you can just use string or get somebody to hold the brake on for you. The reason we do that is we want to tighten the calipers on the disc, and that'll put them in a nice central position, which is perfect for us when we tighten them. Whilst we have our brakes on, it's holding the caliper nice and central. So I'm just going to use the Allen key and just do it up until we start to get some resistance. I'm going to go to the back one and do the same on the back. I can see there it just kicked the rotor over a little bit, so I'm just going to loosen it and tighten it again, just holding it a little bit firmer with my finger. I'll go back to the front and tighten it a little bit more. Go to the back, tighten it. Again, we don't over tighten it, we just nip it up. Okay, our wheel is locked solid at the moment. I'm going to release the brake. That'll release the wheel. I'll give the brake a couple of pumps just to centre the disc pads again. And now I can spin it, and we've got really good clearance. It's just the slightest rubbing, and that's just because the disc isn't perfectly flat yet. After we do a few braking runs, that'll position itself nicely. I'm happy with that. My battery is finished charging. So first of all, I'm going to position the seat roughly where I want it. And I'm just going to tighten up this clamp a little bit for now. I'm going to tip the seat forward. And I'm going to align the back of the battery onto this rail. There's actually a channel that it sits in. Let it slide down gently. Don't ever let it drop because you'll break the plate on the bottom. So just put it down firmly. We can now rotate the key, and the battery's now locked onto the bike and can't get stolen. I'm going to put the seat back in its position, and I'm just going to go and final adjust this clamp here. You want it nice and firm, and that way the seat won't move. Okay, I'm just going to slide this down now we've got it off charge. I'm going to do a final adjustment to the clamp here. So I'm just going to tighten it up, make it nice and firm. That's great. Now one of the modifications to the new 2027 model is a suspension seat. So this rubber is just a cover, but the seat now has inbuilt suspension. So when you hit bumps, it'll compress under your weight. And that's quite a nice addition to the 2027 version of the Fat Trike bike. Now one thing I forgot to do earlier was to connect our harness together here. So this connects the rear tail light, so I'm going to clip that in. I'm just going to use a couple of cable ties to hold this up and out of the road so it stays in position. We're just going to fit our two rear mudguards. I've just cheated by letting the tyre down again because I need to get some tools in there to tighten it up, but we have two mudguard brackets. This one has a little indent at the back, it's cut off, so I always like to make that the back position. It doesn't matter whichever way you go because they're basically identical. I just do that for familiarity and consistency. So I'm just going to grab some screws and we'll just put it in place. The reason I've let the tyre down is so I can get access here without using an Allen key and having having it go over a few minutes, I can just, to tighten up, I can just push the tie down and get the bolt in. Before I tighten it up, I'm going to lift it all the way up. That'll give us the best clearance between the mudguard and the tyre. Push the tie down. That's it. We've got some brackets we need to mount front and rear. So these will go on the ends. We can do those at the same time. Okay, we're just going to fit the rear mudguard bracket. Get that started. And again, I'm going to pull it away from the wheel. And we do that just to give it as much clearance as it needs. Going to do exactly the same at the other end. Now we can go and mount the mudguard. We'll position the mudguard. It's important to know that there is a back and a front, so you'll see the gap between the edge and this hole is a good finger span. On this way it's much less, so this is the front. You might also notice that there's a couple of little holes that we've just put in. These are extra holes we've done for the customer because he wants to mount some sort of lighting on the side. So he asked for a couple of holes in the middle. So for now, we're going to just mount this. So it's the dome nut, a washer, and it'll have a nylock nut on the inside. So you just push it through, get your finger in there and start it, and then we can come back and line it up in a minute. I'll do the same at the other end. We'll position the mudguard nice and central so it's in the middle of the tyre, and we can tighten everything up. One of the great things with these mudguards on the Fat Trike is that they're really stable. They don't rattle or vibrate while you're riding. We've got that installed, so now I can go ahead and pump up the tyre again. I've got it down off our assembly bench. So we need to do a couple of final things. I'm just going to lift the handlebars up. So we'll loosen the top clamp for the handlebar, and that way we can rotate them. Still a bit tight. Rotate them, put them in the centre, get them in what I think will be a nice position for the rider, and we can clamp them back up again. Let's just go and check all four. They're all about the same tension. I'm going to move the display over to the right hand side of the bike because that'll give us enough room to fit the front headlight. Once I've got that over, M3 Allen key, I'm just going to tighten the bracket that holds the display because that's fairly loose. Our front light gets fitted to the handlebars here, and the cable for it gets connected into the wiring harness. So we'll just loosen this off. Inside there's two rubber inserts. We just use the thinner one, and that gets wrapped around the handlebars. When you do that, make sure you don't get the cable caught up. The bigger piece can just get put to the side for later. We now undo our clamp, go around the handlebar, position it nicely, push the rubber under so it's all lined up. And we can tighten this up. Do this fairly firm to stop the light from sliding on the handlebar. We can tilt its adjustment angle down once we've got everything on. We'll go ahead now and connect up the harness. Just firm that up a bit. We'll just point it down. So that's about it for now. We'll test the brakes. So front brakes are working, back brakes are working. I'll turn our battery on, turn on our screen. The display's coming on, we're in kilometres an hour. All of the Sobowo tricycles have always been test ridden at the factory. This one has got 1.5 kilometres on it already. Most of them seem to have about 800 metres to a kilometre. Bell works, throttle works. I think we're pretty right to go. We can take it out and go for a test ride. That's it for this one. I'll package up the charger and the tools and put them in the toolkit for the customer along with both of the manuals. And I'll get outside and give this a test ride, come back and make any tweaks that I need to make. I've still got a little bit of plastic I've got to remove off the back, but for now, that's it. We've got this bike together, ready to enter service after a first test ride. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed following along while we've assembled the new 2027 version of the Sobowo FAT Tricycle. Thanks for watching.